Well, good evening, everybody. It's Chris here from the Whistle Stop Cafe in Mirror, Alberta. Live again for like the fifth time this week. Can you believe it? I'm not sure where I'm finding the time, but apparently I have time somewhere. So, like I said before, the reason I've been doing more and more podcasts lately is because every time I see something on social media or the news, although I rarely watch the news, or I hear a conversation in the booth beside or behind me as I'm having breakfast in Lacombe, like this morning, I realize there is a ton of stuff to talk about, and it's all really, really important stuff, like stuff that's going to directly affect our near-term and long-term futures, right? Like what we have going on with our Alberta government is it's monumental, to say the least. What's going on in Canada is highlighting some of the major problems that have been issue for, some of them 100, 150 years. What's going on in the United States is a culmination of the pendulum swinging the other way and all of the sudden returning back to reality. So all of these things together, I really think Alberta has been put in a unique position where we can and must do something. And if you are just joining me now for the first time, I'll let the cat out of the bag. I'm a Alberta independence-minded individual. I was the interim CEO for the Alberta Prosperity Project, which is an educational society dedicated to the freedom and prosperity of Alberta and Albertans. And the only way to do that, in our humble opinion, is through full Alberta sovereignty, whether within or external to Confederation. So basically that means, we need to do something different. We need to gain some leverage to either fix the position we're in as things are, or we need to stand on our own. Or now, interestingly enough, we're being courted by probably the most consequential president in American history. Donald Trump has often mused about Canada becoming the 51st state, but you and I both really know that what he's talking about is Alberta becoming the 51st state, because I really don't think he wants the GTA or Quebec, for that matter. Beautiful places, but not problems that the United States wants. Anyway, because of all these things, I reached out to a friend of mine who helped me and the Whistle Stop Cafe through a lot of tribulations we went through back in 2021, 2022. She is, in my opinion, one of the utmost authorities on all things Albertan. She's always there when things are going on. She always has something very interesting to say about things. And she gives us a perspective from a real person, not some regurgitated talking points from CBC or CTV or whatever, but like an actual Albertan that wants solutions for Alberta. So my guest tonight is Sheila Gunn Reid from Rebel News. And I guess I'll bring her on so you don't have to continue staring at me for so long. Hi,
hey,
Sheila.
Chris. Hey, I'm excited to be on the show for the first time. I've always been the interviewer when it comes to you. So I'm happy to be on the other side of the microphone.
Well, feel free to flip the tables at any time, because this isn't, as you know, this isn't my day job. I'm basically an underpaid waitress that happens to cook sometimes. But I kind of figured we have this audience. People are looking to us for answers and things like that, especially considering what happened with COVID and the Whistle Stop Cafe. And then I started thinking, well, you know what? If people talk about things, if we have more discussions, things get done and things change. And we've really seen that in Alberta. And I know you've been a major, major part of that. Rebel News has been covering all of this stuff. So do you want to maybe just kind of give folks a brief outline of what you've seen happening in the last few years, even before the pandemic, leading up to the position that Alberta's at right now, where we have a premier who pretty much made the prime minister irrelevant?
Yeah, and God love her for not leaving our relationship with the incoming and now new Trump administration up to the idiots in Ottawa who have no clue how to bring the heat down in this tariff war that I think is really going to hammer the East. I think we might largely escape it out here in the West, but thank goodness for her. I was thinking about the topic of Alberta separatism or Alberta sovereignty, whatever that looks like. Some people think that means becoming your own country, or maybe that means joining the United States, or maybe it just means flexing your muscles a little bit more and exerting your autonomy within Confederation. People have different opinions on that, but it, I think in Alberta, it was really at its highest when Rachel Notley was in power in the dying days of the Rachel Notley government. We did a story. We sent a journalist out onto the streets yesterday, actually, I said, go to where the people are. Go to, the plaza in front of Calgary City Hall and just start talking to people. Don't pick them by what they look like. Just whoever will talk to you, I want you to talk to them. And he asked some really great questions. And I recommend that people go look at that video. And it basically said, Trump is floating this idea of Alberta or Canada becoming the 51st state. I'm not sure I want to bring the rest of them with me, but we went out on the streets and asked the question, well, maybe not Canada, but what about us?
I would love to see Canada be the 51st state.
Sorry.
Exactly. Me too. But he went out and he asked these questions, and it's not cantankerous old farmers saying, yeah, we're getting screwed in Confederation. I'm willing to hear what the Americans are offering. It's young people, women, lots of women were saying, yeah, we're getting a raw deal here in Canada. And it wouldn't be so bad to be an American. It was actually the one leftist guy that you could pick out of a lineup just based on his choice of headwear that was, the one who said, we're Canadians. And
was it kind of like this guy?
My old buddy, Dion Buse, DionBuse.com in perpetuity. Yep. So that got me thinking, and I was sort of digging down into the numbers on this. 2019, 50% of Albertans would support secession from Canada. Now, in contrast, that remains higher than Quebec, even now today. So we got Jason Kenney. People thought, he's a great hope for us all. Then, as you know, Chris, he wasn't. But then we got Danielle Smith, and she prickles against the feds. And for a lot of people, that's all they wanted, was someone to stand up for the province's rights and do something more than the strongly worded letters that, since they weren't written in crayon, you knew Justin Trudeau wouldn't read. So she's launched some legislative court battles against the feds. Danielle Smith has won a few of those. And so the support for separatism has come down a bit, but it still remains higher than Quebec's. Quebec, it's around 23%. We hover anywhere from like 28 to 35, sometimes as high as 40 consistently. So the mood is still there. And especially now, I would love to see what that polling looks like a month from now, as the Canadian economy gets hammered by tariffs, especially as we're being told we need to shutter in our jobs, burn down our economy to heat the rest of the country. Again, in some sort of tariff war. I pulled the numbers on this too. 560,000 Canadian jobs are supported directly or indirectly by the oil and gas sector. A smart government, which we don't have, would say, holy hell, the auto sector is going to get hammered. Softwood lumber is going to get hammered. Agricultural products might get hammered. You know what we need to do? We need to keep 500,000 jobs humming along, well-paying jobs to keep one part of the economy afloat. But no, the solution for the feds is level it all, burn it all down. And I think it's because the Liberals cannot campaign against Poilievre. They can't run on their record. So all they can do is campaign against Trump.
I've seen that lots in politics. Politicians or parties in general, they can't run on their own platform. So they run like against something else.
Yeah.
That was the NDP's whole thing. We are the least bad of all the bad, right? It's absolutely pathetic. So when as you've watched the news or been making the news in the last little while, did it bring as big of a smile to your face as it did to mine when I watched our premier doing the job of the prime minister and actually fighting for all Canadians, even though it seems at times that a lot of the rest of the country is just happy to throw Alberta under the bus.
You know, I'm really proud of the job that she's doing. And it's not something that has just come out of nowhere with her. I mean, she announced the border enforcement in Alberta, but that has been 6 months in the works. It's been a long time coming because she knows that drug trafficking is happening at that border. They're catching people smuggling enough drugs to kill every man, woman, and child in this province in these drug busts. And, you know, now it's relevant because you can show the Trump administration, look, Trudeau's not willing to do this, but we are. We're working hard to keep Albertans safe, and we're working hard to keep our friends on the other side of the Coutts-Sweetgrass borders safe as well. But right after Trump got elected, before, you know, he was even musing about who he would pick in his administration, Danielle Smith was meeting with the Western governors, trying to build inroads. We all saw her go to Mar-a-Lago. You know, Trump, so much of his foreign policy and also, you know, his business dealings have been a lot of times based on his own intuition and his gut feeling. Mm-hmm. Does he like you? Does he feel like he can trust you? And it, by and large, it's worked out for him. And so she got down there and she made sure he saw her face, knew that she was willing to work with him, that she was a friend and an ally, which is something we've always called ourselves when dealing with the Americans. We're friends, we're allies, we brag about the largest undefended border in the world, but we have not been acting like good friends. And then you see Doug Ford. Doug Ford were smart, and that's questionable. He should have said, Danielle, take me to Mar-a-Lago. Mm-hmm. We've got tariffs coming. I need to pull the auto sector out of this mess.
He should be fighting for his province too.
Yeah. Instead, the only jobs in manufacturing that might get saved are the ones that are propped up by the oil patch in Ontario, which I think is around 180,000 Canadian jobs. I mean, it's just wild that he didn't. Doug Ford chose to side with Trudeau, his buddy Justin, instead of doing whatever he could to save those Ontario jobs. It's astounding that that's the path he chose, but I'm so proud of Premier Smith for refusing to go along to get along. You know, it must have been tough for her in that first minister's meeting to have all the premiers staring at her saying, sign this letter. And she walked out and she didn't, and then issued her own statement. And next week, still they're sending a trade mission to the United States. I just got the press release late today that early next week, 3 cabinet ministers are headed, I think it's to Salem, Oregon, on a trade mission to say, like, look, we're open for business. Justin Trudeau might not be open for business, but we're not like them. And she continues to work hard despite the preening of the likes of Andrew Coyne, one of the boiled potatoes from the CBC At Issue panel, saying that it's somehow un-Canadian of her to not destroy 500,000 jobs in this country. It boggles the mind.
Yeah, those I don't know if they're even leftist lunatics. I don't even know what to call them at this point, but those that came out in opposition to Premier Smith, and you know, I actually envisioned them like the meme of the lady in the glasses that's screaming, "No!" the first time Trump got elected. Mm-hmm. That was what I envisioned those journalists, I use the word loosely, and politicians when they saw this. And I think the main reason for that is because when she did that, she actually exposed how impotent our prime minister is. He's completely irrelevant. He's completely useless. He didn't do anything to try and protect the relationship we have with our neighbors to the south. He took to social media and the news, and he said these ridiculous things, these ridiculous threats that he can never back up. And he's using the entire country as some sort of I don't even know what the word is. Like, he's willing to just burn everything down. But I mean, he's leaving anyway. He's resigned. I don't know what his plans are for the future, but It's unreal. And this might be a genetic thing, right? Because
Yeah.
his father was the same way. His father, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, did the exact same thing. And I didn't realize how the independence movement in Alberta had evolved until one of my friends sent me a video from January 1981. And it was an interview on Webster. Do you remember that old Irish guy? He always was just hammering people on interviews. He was interviewing a man named Elmer Knutson. Now, you know who Elmer Knutson is?
No.
He was the founder of the West Fed.
Yes.
West Fed Association. He wanted to confederate the 4 Western provinces. And his thing was, no, I'm not a separatist. We're literally not confederated. This hasn't worked and it wasn't done properly. So let's do it, but let's do it for the West. And it was like I was watching something from today. It was all the same. Prior to him, Bob McClellan, the British Columbia Minister of Energy at the time, was on, and he was saying the same thing. Like Trudeau is willing to sacrifice our province to accomplish his goals, and he was referring to the national energy policy at the time. And then Elmer Knutson came on, and it was the same exact thing. Alberta, we were underrepresented, or not represented really.
No.
And he outlined it all. So it's pretty cool. I mean, it's frustrating, but it's cool to see that we've been through this before. We've tried a whole bunch of different things. We had Mulroney canceled the national energy policy that was supposed to be repairing the relationship. It didn't really. I mean, we still had billions of dollars of damage to repair. And then Preston Manning, he built the Reform Party in this huge revival of Westernism with the slogan, "The West wants in." Like, we're going to get in and we're going to fix this and we're going to be equal partners at the table. Nothing's worked. And here we are in 2025 with the same kind of destruction looming at the hands of the federal government. And Alberta, had it not been for Danielle Smith, can do nothing about it. And you mentioned how she was kind of attacked by the rest of the Team Canada. And one of the things I really respect about her is how she's able to go through that stuff with such grace. Like, she doesn't turn into a mouth frothing, bumbling fool like our prime minister does. She actually gets her point across and convinces people to come with her. I mean, even Legault is agreeing with her now, and Scott Moe, I think, does now. So she's really made some progress. With all these things in mind, do you think that if we see major tariffs and Alberta is threatened with the destruction we saw in the early 80s, do you think that we might see a referendum from our government?
I'm not sure. You know what, I would like to, because I'm a fan of putting it to the people, letting the people have their say. I'd love to see a movement for that. If they forcibly shutter in our oil and gas sector, shutter in our jobs, force us to bend the knee to Confederation, you'll see a separatist movement rise in this province like these people have never seen. It's funny because my first real study of Western separatism was a movie that I actually think I saw on the CBC one night real late. And it was in 2012. And it was called The Disunited States of Canada. And it was made by, I think, French separatists. And they started looking into separatist movements all across the country. And they found this kinship with the separatists in Alberta. They didn't realize what our problems were and how we felt the same way they did, culturally incompatible with the rest of the country. I think you probably would relate to me on this. I feel more of a kinship with someone from Montana than I would with someone from Toronto. I feel like they would understand me a little bit more than somebody from Toronto ever would.
I would agree. Yeah.
And they examined this issue and they said separatism in Alberta was just soaring. And do you know what put a button on it? What ended it? The election of Stephen Harper. Because we thought, and it just dropped off a cliff after that. And, we sort of saw a little bit with the election of Danielle Smith. someone who we felt is on our side, is fighting for provincial autonomy, fighting back against the feds, our voice in Ottawa. And, I think as long as Danielle Smith continues to fight for Albertans, and as long as our oil patch isn't shuttered in because the feds don't know how to bring the heat down with Donald Trump, like, could one person in the federal government read The Art of the Deal? That would be helpful. But as long as she continues to do those things and we still have our oil patch, I think we're going to hover around 25 to 30%. They touch our oil patch again, and you are going to see an uprising in the West like nothing we have ever seen before.
I agree. It's interesting that you pointed out that Stephen Harper being elected was what kind of calmed Western Canada down. I get why it did, but if people had paid attention to what was going on in Canada prior to that, and I mean, I was just a little guy back then. I didn't really pay attention to much else, but besides my Nintendo in 1986, Brian Mulroney, he was supposed to be good for the West. And, he was the prime minister that shafted Manitoba and gave Quebec the contract for the CF-18 maintenance, even though Manitoba won. And the reason then is the same as now, is he could not do something for the West because you cannot be that prime minister. Stephen Harper, I think he helped write the firewall letters, basically the guide on how Alberta could insulate itself from the federal government and protect our own interests and prosperity. And not one of those things ever happened. And it's not because he didn't believe in it. It's not because he didn't know it to be true. It's because the business case for being the Prime Minister of Canada is that you may not do anything to elevate the West from their subservient position in which they find themselves. You can't do it. Pierre Poilievre, it's going to be the same thing. He says he's not going to touch equalization. He's spoken out against an Alberta pension plan. I'm not saying he's a bad guy. And I get it. It's just business. He wants to become Prime Minister. But if that's the case, if history has taught us that we can never have a prime minister that will repair the inequity between East and West here, why would we want to stay?
Well, and that's the thing. I don't know if you read the Jordan Peterson article that sent Andrew Coyne into the vapors yesterday, but it basically said, well, the title of it was, and I'm paraphrasing, you've got to offer Alberta something more than what Canada is right now if you want them to stay or want to stay within Confederation. And then he laid out all the ways that Canada has actually taken our relationship with not only Alberta for granted, but taken the relationship with the United States for granted. And, when Trump jokes about, and I do believe he's joking when he says, we could just make them the 51st state. First of all, I don't think he wants everybody else. But but he's joking when he says, we could take them over, or, we could just take them over economically. He's teasing us because we're sensitive about those things. But there's a lot of truth in there. And the truth really is that in the last 10 years under the Liberals, we've gone from strong, stable economy, a proud reputation around the world, safe streets, to absolute social and moral decay in this country. If you take out a couple of major, highly dangerous Democrat-run American cities, Canada is far more dangerous as far as violent crime than the United States by and large. Like, take out Chicago and a couple of the worst places. And we, per capita, are worse. But taxes are out of control. Our wages are in the toilet. Housing costs are way up. Healthcare system would rather kill you than treat you. We're importing thousands of people with extremist ideologies into our streets, and they march every single weekend. And we've got a military that's completely decrepit. They've got a crisis of, first of all, recruitment, and then retention, and they're woke, and the equipment is just ancient. And so anybody could take us over, financially or otherwise. It's not just the Americans with their world's largest economy and their strongest military in the entire world that could take us over. It could be just about anybody. And if it were not for the benevolence of our neighbors to the south, they would do it to us. And so we should start acting that way. But we don't. We have this moral superiority, like Justin Trudeau, when he said, what's the best thing about being Canadian? That we're not American.
Wow.
That's somebody who, he said that in an interview, that's somebody who's actually never thought about what it really means to be a Canadian, that we're good neighbors.
Think he knows.
I don't think he knows. He thinks we're a post-national state, but he's never thought, we're a good neighbor. We stand for freedom. We stand for free speech. He's never, ever thought about any of that. All he could say is, well, at least we're not those guys down there. It was repulsive. I would have been repulsed if I were American, that the people to the north that only exist because we're nice to them thinks that we are a slur. It's time we recognize that it's a problem we have to fix, and we should be working cooperatively with the United States instead of picking fights with them every step of the way. I mean, did you see that interview that Justin Trudeau gave, or was a speech actually? And he said, the Americans really dropped the ball, and I'm paraphrasing here, that they had the chance to elect a woman, a progressive woman, but they elected Donald Trump. Like, he says that in the middle of a trade war, calls him an illegitimate president. Watch the Liberals pick the rich white guy.
Is that feminism to elevate a woman to a particular position just because they're a woman? I think that would be an insult more than a accolade.
I don't know. Ask Chrystia Freeland. She's about to lose to Mark Carney.
Ooh, yeah. Yeah, I don't know what it is about her, like what is with her that she is one of the most off-putting people to watch speak that I have ever encountered in my entire life.
It's like her inner demons are trying to be her outer ones. I don't know what is going on with her. I don't know if she has extreme social anxiety, but she talks to you like the most condescending kindergarten teacher that you've ever had. She talks to us like we are junior high students and she's the kindergarten teacher scolding us always, just nodding and thanking us and telling us we know, and you all know, that it is very important for us to all be in this together. There's something about how she talks to us that makes me insane.
Well, I think it's a good kind of reflection of how government is treating us across the board. I mean, it seems like in the last while, it's become, we elect these people and they just become our new gods, and they're going to do what they're going to do. And if we don't like it, we're sewer rats or embarrassing cousins or something like that. It's so much different now than it was when I was a kid. And I only remember this because I remember watching election stuff on TV and people being excited about it. And it seemed like, at least in my family, my parents always had people over, and there could be people on either side of the fence, and they would still break bread together. It's not like that now. Like, if you believe in one of the left-leaning ideologies, you must believe in the others. Otherwise, you're just not a good enough, you're not a good enough lefty. It's so different.
Yeah, we saw this during COVID, where it became a moral failing.
Yes.
If you just thought differently about something. It wasn't like you just had a different opinion. Maybe you had a different worldview. You had a different lived experience, as they say. And so you came to a different opinion than somebody else. That used to be okay. Like you could say, maybe I think you're wrong, but I don't think you're evil. Now it is, you're wrong and you're evil. And there's not even a discussion to be had. There's no like, hey, why do you think that way? Or maybe I'll tell you why I think the way I do so that you can understand me a little bit better. Those conversations absolutely do not happen anymore, because now straying from the official accepted narrative makes you a bad person. You're an evil person. We heard Justin Trudeau call people evil, despicable things, when all they did was want to have Christmas, travel across the country, go have a beer without telling your bartender your medical history. It became, it made you a bad person if you didn't want to do those things. You were akin to a Nazi. You may as well have been a Nazi. The most evil creatures to have ever walked the face of the earth, you were one of them too, if you just didn't think that it was anybody's business what your medical decisions were. I think it happened a little bit prior. It happened during the Trump administration, when they started to demonize anybody on the right. And then it really, during COVID, was their chance to just hammer that ideology into the public ethos. However, I think the victory of Trump in the United States is, the death knell for that sort of thinking. Because I think a lot of people were realizing, my friends and neighbors, they just thought differently than me. And actually, maybe they were right about a lot of things. And maybe I'm going to vote the same way they do this time. I think a lot of that happened in the United States. And I am hopeful that things are changing in Canada. Maybe we'll see. But like any good cult, the people left behind are the most radicalized, right?
Yeah.
Like those are the ones that
wailing.
Those are the ones that end up drinking the Flavor Aid and, ending up dead in a jungle. Like they don't get off the wild ride. They don't leave the cult. And so I think the people that we're dealing with on the left right now, the good ones already left. Like the good ones are already like, yeah, I'm probably going to vote conservative because the cost of living is killing me. Or I'm going to vote conservative because I think immigration levels are too high. Those like normal middle people, they're over in the conservative camp already, which means the ones that are left behind just on Team Mark Carney, they are dangerously radical.
You're talking about the ones that acknowledge that, oh, okay, so I'm a liberal, but reality has firmly slapped me in the face. And okay, I get it. Yeah, you can't hide from reality that long. What you're talking about with not being able to talk to people and people being considered Nazis and those types of things. If you look at the United States, almost all of those influential internet, social media, famous people who were called Nazis are now elevated to extreme positions of public posture. Like it's fantastic. But if you think about how far this progressed, any reasonable person who believes in the sanctity of life and humanity should be able to at least realize we got to the point where Canadians called for other Canadians to be jailed because they didn't want to take a particular medical intervention. That was Canada.
Yeah.
Right?
And it's almost unbelievable. And that's why, you see people, some people are just conspiracy theorists now to a fault. And I don't blame them.
How can you not be, right?
Exactly. Like there are some people who think some outlandish things. And I might be one of those people on any given day, depending on what government documents I've read. But I don't blame any of them, because who could even believe 10 years ago that we would have went through the last 4.5 or 5 years? Who
could have believed that an American president would have to declare that there's two genders?
Right. Exactly. That we would be banned from Christmas, that I would witness pastors getting arrested, police fencing up churches, businesses chained up, and diner owners spending 3 days in jail, because they just wanted to do business because they had bills to pay, and they wanted to serve food to willing customers. You didn't abduct anybody into your restaurant. They all came because they wanted to eat there. To imagine that that's where we were, that we had to have a convoy to Ottawa to have our voices heard, and then they used a counterterrorism law on those people. I mean, it's just wild, the things we lived through. So now when I see people who are just believing everything they read, it's because they're skeptics to a fault. And who can blame them? Who can blame them? What the damage that's been done to society?
Have you seen the movie Dystopia?
No.
Oh, you got to watch it. It came out just before COVID. And the premise is people are getting sick. There's this weird sickness. This big benevolent manufacturer of vaccines, a pharmaceutical company, makes this vaccination that's going to save everybody. And it's a really, I can't remember much more of it, but in the end, they realized that the pharmaceutical company, they created this sickness, pretended the vaccine was helping people, but actually it was sterilizing people because they believed that the world was overpopulated. And this was like just before the pandemic. So as these things were progressing, I didn't watch it until midway through 2020, but I was just like, I thought you couldn't write this stuff, but somebody has written it, and nobody's talking about the fact that this movie was out. But really, as you mentioned, the things going on and getting crazier and crazier. If you wrote that as a script for a movie, that would be a blockbuster, an absolute blockbuster.
I don't think they'd make it. Like,
it'd be too unbelievable.
It would just be too crazy. Yeah, I don't think they would make it.
Yeah, and now here we are, 2025. A lot of the truth that we held on to that entire time has started to kind of make its way to the surface, because as everybody knows, the truth will stand independent of critics no matter what, till the end of time. And now people are starting to realize it. One of the things that happened over the last week was our friend Dr. Gary Davidson finally released his report on what the government did during COVID, how things could have been better, those types of things. And I read it, and it's scathing. Like, it is absolutely scathing. And he even, I did a little podcast with him as he was traveling to the airport that day. And he said, listen, we wanted the data. We wanted to find out what happened by the numbers and by, peer-reviewed studies of certain things. And they went all over the world, talked to all sorts of experts. Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, who was a contributor, is now the incoming head of the National Institute of Health in the United States.
Right.
That's a pretty big job. And the media, of course, went ballistic. They started attacking and trying to discredit and silence and shut up anybody who was talking about this. And of course, it's gonna come down. But I noticed that when the premier I guess the word is attacked by the media about this, she said, I stand by my team. We hired them to do this report. They did the report. Here's the data. Take it for what it is. If you disagree with it, show us where we're wrong.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So now we have this truth coming out. And I think some of those people that we talked about that wanted their neighbors jailed, or their family members worse, jailed because it wouldn't take a medical intervention, they're looking at this and like, oh crap, I have two choices. I can either continue to push this and double down and go harder and call these people more names, or I can kind of be like, yeah, sorry. Didn't mean it. Let's just get on with our lives. And it's getting pretty hairy. My Twitter is going absolutely nuts. And I never used to be on Twitter, because when it was still Twitter instead of X, it was horrible.
It was horrific. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's back to like,
2015 fun. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's funny because, not only did Danielle Smith hire this team to do this work, but Albertans hired her to get to the bottom of what happened during COVID, because she was willing to do that work. And I see that the Alberta Medical Association, those censors over there, and the Canadian Medical Association, the CMA, have both come out against this report. Now, they don't actually say what is wrong with the report. They just say it's full of medical misinformation. Okay, give me an example, guys. The report cites Pfizer's own data, So what's your rebuttal, Canadian doctors? But as you rightly point out, the choices here are admit that you were wrong and you advised people to do wrong things. And through your advice, those people who trusted you harmed themselves and harmed their neighbors. And you would have to admit then that not only were you wrong, but you might have even have been evil. Or you can just insist against all evidence that the other people are wrong. And so this is the dilemma that the doctors and the lockdowners find themselves in. It's like that meme with Principal Skinner. Is it the kids who are wrong? Or is it me? Am I the wrong one, or is it the kids who are wrong? Well, of course, they're saying it's the kids who are wrong, because the choice is that they were wrong, evil, and did a lot of bad things to a lot of innocent people. And so, of course, the people who advised all this stuff, of course, they're not going to admit that this report that found themselves wrong, that found the doctors wrong, they're not going to admit that there's any truth in it. They have to continue with the lie. Although I'm not sure that I want to let the people who think that they should medically transition minors be the arbiters of medical truth anymore.
Word. Yes. Doctors are supposed to be like the pinnacle of society. We're supposed to be able to trust them over anyone else. And I think that a lot of that trust could be regained with a little bit of humility. I'm sure you must have heard in the last little while, lots of doctors privately, quietly, behind, closed doors, telling their patients, listen, don't take any more of those shots. They're probably dangerous, but just don't do it. I'm not going to say that publicly, but don't do it. Right. And some of these ones that were really vocal, I think if they were humble and they said, listen, we were given wrong advice and we're sorry, and that's the end of it, that would garner a lot more grace from society than digging in your heels and continuing to push a failing narrative. I really hope that the majority of people choose the former rather than the latter, because it's, things will only get worse if more time goes on and more people are harmed by, what occurred over that time. And thinking, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to jump in. Sorry to interrupt,
That's
but
okay.
I was just going to say, there's another societal side note in all of this, is that the powers that be now know who they can control and who they can't.
Yeah.
Right? That I think is the more chilling thing going forward, is the people who were the free thinkers, the people who knew right from wrong and black and white, that were in positions of power, the people who knew about the ethical issues with forcing people to take something that they didn't want to take, experimental or not, those people were booted out. They are no longer cops. They are no longer in the military. So now we have the knock-on effect of our institutions being populated unthinking do-nothings who will just do whatever somebody tells them to do instead of doing the right thing. Like the very people we want in positions of leadership were kicked out of positions of leadership for having a good moral compass. And that is going to have a very dangerous long-term effect on our public institutions. And that's what happens when we live through a societal Milgram experiment. Do you know about the Milgram experiment? Ezra makes me watch this clip about once a month.
Yeah, wasn't it the doctor told someone that they were going to hurt someone by pressing a button, and they just kept doing it as they were ordered to do it, even to the point of death?
Right. And nobody was actually hurt. It was actors involved, but it was what people would do if someone in a white coat told them to do. And a very small number of people actually resisted being told to harm a person on the other side of the screen because a guy in a white coat just told you to. The overwhelming majority of people just did what the person told them to do. And we saw that play out in front of us for 3 straight years. And it makes me scared for the state of society.
At first, I was scared at where we're headed. Like, it seemed like people were losing their humanity. But then I thought about it and I realized this isn't new. This isn't a new thing. We think that in 2025, we're all enlightened and we treat each other better. But the reality is we're not much different now than we were 5,000 years ago. I mean, just a few hundred years ago, if somebody could eat a tomato without dying, we would burn them as a witch. Right. It's the same thing over and over and over again. Yeah. And knowing that we're afflicted with this human condition, what do we do to try and temper it?
Well, that's the thing. All you can do is be true to yourself. Be the people in the Milgram experiment who said, no, I'm not doing that. And sometimes bad things will happen to you, as you know, Chris. But I think because of those bad things, you came out on the other side none the worse for wear, I would say. Like I wasn't in jail with you. But I know that it was hard there, but would that have been worse than violating your conscience? Because I think once you violate your conscience like that, then they can get you to do anything.
I don't talk about it too much, but I have this little regret from that whole time. My lawyers, when I was in jail, they said, just sign the bail conditions, say you'll follow the rules, get out of jail. It's better for you. And I've regretted it ever since. Like if I could do anything over, I would stay in jail just as long as James Coates did. He was in jail for like what,
30 days.
30 days?
Yeah, 30. It was almost 6 weeks. Yeah.
Art was in jail for a long time. Like there were some people, they took it even farther than I did. And Tamara, they refused to even give the illusion of bowing to that. And I did the best I could. I took the best advice that I had, and I made the decision. But I wouldn't do it again. That's for sure.
Well, I don't think anybody would ever begrudge you that decision. We weren't in your shoes, but boy, we were sure cheering for you. But again, like if you had not opened your restaurant, if you had not served those dangerous unvaccinated people, you would have been a cog in the system that perpetrated the discrimination. And I know I could not have lived with myself to have done that. If somebody ever said, you can't go these places, if it were ever a thing that were open to somebody else that I couldn't go to, I surrounded myself with people who would make those decisions that they wouldn't choose to be in the medical upper class. And so you really knew who your friends were. And I firmly believe that once they get you to just make that one little decision to violate your conscience, you're capable of everything eventually. So
I think our legislators need to consider that and never let go of that knowledge. We hear that all too often. We elect somebody, they're such a great person, they get in, and then all of a sudden a year goes by and we don't recognize them anymore. We're like, well,
Jason Kenney.
Jason Kenney. Jason Kenney, I was so happy.
I was psyched. I was psyched.
Man. I mean, this guy, he's a conservative. He's going to parachute in. And he's like friggin' Rambo coming into Alberta to fix everything, right? And to be let down. And I mean, it was probably that way from the beginning. It wasn't what I thought. I just wanted that. But yeah, that was a pretty big letdown. But you know what? To his benefit, he did publicly chastise me, and he called me a scofflaw and a rebel. And rather than getting mad, I made t-shirts.
Exactly.
Right? So you can find a little bit of good in everything. So with all these things going on, Alberta on the precipice of another circa 1982 NEP disaster, Canada not a unified team with a completely castrated leadership, ineffective, weak, and a neighbor to the south that is in the strongest position that I've ever seen any world leader in. What do you think we should be doing right now as Albertans?
It's a great question. What could we be doing? We're Albertans. When the shit goes sideways, what do? We just work real hard to get ourselves out of it. We work harder. And, I was reading a poll today, and it was a poll of Americans. And for me, I thought, oh, this is where we have dropped the ball completely. And I'm looking at you, oil and gas industry, because you guys have all the money to do this work. But me, tomorrow, I'm going to start. The poll says that when you ask Americans where they get the majority of their foreign oil and gas, where do you think they answer?
Do they answer Saudi?
Yes.
Ouch.
It's Saudi. They think they get the majority of their oil and gas, their foreign sourced oil and gas, from Saudi Arabia.
I think we supply 60%.
Yes. And the majority of that is, of course, from Alberta. And so that's a huge problem, because we're dealing with people who don't understand how important we are to them on this one issue. That's a failing. That's a failing of the federal government, who should have been communicating that all along. But we have an anti-oil and gas federal government to start with. This is something Danielle Smith is playing catch up on, but this is something that we can all do as advocates for our province, to just get the facts out. We all have social media. You're living it up on X now. I have a large contingent of Americans who watch me and follow me. Again, don't leave the Team Canada approach to Justin Trudeau and the 8 other premiers, or maybe more when you count the territories. I'm pulling Scott Moe out of the mix because he made a statement yesterday. But
he came around.
Yeah, he did eventually. But it's on us we have to advocate for ourselves. I think that's the best thing that we can do. I'm not one to say support our premier as she in this fight, but next time somebody says that she's a traitor, tell them why she's not. Tell them how many jobs are at stake. Tell an American, actually, you don't get all your oil from Saudi Arabia. You get it from us, and we'd love to keep selling it to you at not right now at a reduced rate, but we'd love to get.
We don't want to, but
we don't want to, but here we are. Here we are. We're the discount clearinghouse of oil and gas. We don't want to always be that, but that can't happen overnight. They can't ramp up production in their oil and gas sector in the United States overnight. I think that's the one thing that Albertans can do right now is tell the truth about what's really happening, what our oil and gas sector really means, not just for the rest of the country, but for energy stability in the United States.
So I've done 2 things in response to this, and thank goodness they're both kind of fun. The first one is I've started doing more podcasts.
Yeah.
I did a podcast with Captain James McCormick from West Virginia a couple weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
I did one with Gordon Kessler, who is now he lives in Montana. So 2 Americans are now sharing our stuff.
Exactly.
Tom Marazzo. I'm trying to kind of break into that US audience and have people kind of listen to what we're saying here in Alberta, because it's always nice to have neighbors that are supporting. And I also rejoined the board of the Alberta Prosperity Society. So I want to really, I want to do everything I can to educate Albertans as to why we need to, at the very least, pursue a referendum that will give us leverage to fix things. We have a few choices. My favorite choice is a referendum on independence, where we fix everything. It's equitable. All of the provinces are good. We have a Triple E Senate, and we can function as a confederation where everybody feels like they have a voice. That's my first option.
That's
my second
Goldilocks.
one is it is, yes.
It's Goldilocks. Everything's just right.
A boy can dream, though, right?
Right.
The second one is an independent Republic of Alberta, where we can elect people like Danielle Smith to deal with our international trade, international relations, and forge strong relationships everywhere so that we can be the most prosperous nation on the planet. The third one is to become a 51st state. I mean, I have no problem with the United States. I think they're a wonderful country. They are the best example of a free society that has, been built on Christian Western values, and it's where everybody wants to be because of it. And of course, we would still be a small fish in a big pond. So that's my third, my last choice there. But we have one other choice, and that's do nothing and allow Canada to potentially become the Venezuela of the North. I mean, Venezuela went from a world-class economy, wealthy, massive oil production, beautiful, beautiful place, highly educated population, to
Eating
I'll give you an example of what
animals.
it'd be. Yeah. I worked in Colombia in 2017 and 2018, and I flew into Bogota, and then from Bogota I had to fly to my office in San Alberto. Well, my drive from whichever Barranca Bermeja or Bucaramanga, wherever I flew to, was about 3 hours. And every time I traveled that road from the airport to my office, I would see thousands and thousands of Venezuelans walking from Venezuela through Colombia down to the southern, South American countries. And it didn't change for 2 years. They literally set up camps on our lease roads. There was teenage girls sitting on chairs on the sides of roads waiting for oil workers to pick them up and help, and they could earn some money, if you know what I'm saying. Like I saw these things, and I would have never, ever been able to understand what it means when you allow your country to delve into that kind of socialist nightmare until I saw that. And I only saw the tip of the iceberg. So I really think those are the options we have. What do you think?
What I do know is that something has to change, because we started off this conversation with sort of the realization that this is how it has always been. And it's cyclical. Like every 20 years, we're just like, get us the hell out of here. and we get a little bit of something and then that goes away. And we get a little bit of something and then that goes away. It's like when the man who beats you gives you flowers and you're in that honeymoon period for a little bit. Something has to change. Now, what that is, I think it's up to the people of Alberta. But what I do know is that organizations like the Alberta Prosperity Society, they play a very important role, because they serve a purpose that I think Ralph Klein once pointed out was the success of any good politician. And that is that they create the parade and get the people marching, and then a good politician will jump in front of it and bring it across the finish line. And so I think it's incumbent on organizations like yours to educate the people, to lay out the options just like you did, and say, look, you know the facts. It's your choice. And if you want something different, you cannot just do nothing. You have to get involved.
I think somebody once said evil triumphs when good men do nothing, or something.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I don't know. It's a difficult task, because my day job, of course, is running a restaurant and a convenience store and a gas station and an RV park. That's a full-time job as it is. Yep. You know, I'm a father. I drive my son half an hour to school every morning and half hour back, and he's in basketball and those types of things. I can't do everything, but one thing I've realized is that one person, even doing something small or what you think is small, can make a pretty darn big difference. In January of 2021, when I decided that I was going to probably sacrifice my business to serve people hamburgers, I thought it was going to be a week-long thing. You know, I would just close, make my point, and it would be the end of it. And here we are, what is it, 4 years later?
Yeah.
4 years later, and we're still at it. So, and I think it's made a bit of a difference. Even Ottawa, a few people thought, we're just going to get in some trucks. We're going to drive to Ottawa, make a bit of a protest and be loud, honk our horns for a bit. And look how that turned out. And that was basically a couple people saying, we've had enough. Let's mobilize and do something big. And I think Alberta specifically can be the province that does something big. And no matter what way other Albertans view this, if they want to stay in or be out, at the very least, I think people need to recognize that someone needs to do something, because change will happen regardless of if it's us influencing the change or not. So do we want the parade to be created by these foreign-funded NGOs that have anti-human ideas and want to destroy our Western civilization? Or do we want the parade to be made by people like you, Sheila, and like me and other Albertans who just want to be free and prosperous? That's really the choice, right?
Yeah, it completely is. And I have just come back from the heart of darkness, where all the headwaters of all the bad progressive ideas, where they're formulated and percolated before they flow down like toxic waste into our own government. So I've seen where all these bad ideas come from. There is a very small cabal of people who want to control everything we say and do and own. And the choices for the Liberal Party leadership are both WEF aficionados. So we're going to find out if we're getting Davos man or Davos woman to be the next prime minister. And I think though we are facing that in the short term, what a great motivator to get Albertans involved, because we do have to protect and insulate ourselves from these people and their terrible, terrible ideas.
Absolutely. We let them run amok, whining and dining our politicians for decades. And here we are with policy infiltrating every level of government that is obviously not to our benefit. I mean, these people are supposed to be elected to make laws to our benefit, and they're certainly not. Like, is it a benefit to make a law saying that the federal government can come onto your farm in the name of an emergency, climate or other, and just do whatever they want? Like, we have major government overreach right now in Edgewood, BC, where the government is going to go and murder a bunch of ostriches for the crime of honking.
Being ostrich.
Ostriches honk.
You know what? That story is outrageous. Our Drea Humphrey is really covering that well. That story is so outrageous that it makes me like ostriches. And I think if you are someone who has ever met an ostrich, you do not like them. Like, they're
dinosaurs with feathers.
Their necks are so strangleable. They are for feather boas and cowboy boots. That's why they exist. But I am on the side of the ostrich because the federal government is just going to come in and kill them all, because, the federal government wants to test for avian flu. It's a long, sort of convoluted story, but it's related to the avian flu and the next pandemic. And this is where it starts. So the WEF, with their stupid idea to phase out fossil fueled cars, but for their goal was 2030, while Canada got 2035. That idea didn't just come from nowhere. It was poured into Justin Trudeau's empty vessel of a brain by his WEF overlords. I mean, this is the stuff that's happening in Canada right now, and we have to realize where it's coming from. And it's time we stood up and did something about it.
Absolutely. Folks, you really should pay attention to what's going on with those ostriches. I know it sounds like I'm making a joke, but I'm really not.
No.
There's some really strange things going on there. And I just found out today, and I haven't confirmed it. Sheila, maybe these are not food ostriches. These ostriches are used in medical research. And there's something going on where the ostriches have created antibodies for certain illnesses, and it's amazing. And that's the value of these birds. It's not that we're taking their eggs or making boots out of them. This is literally things that could help people. But because of the avian flu, because 2 birds died and tested positive, even though the rest of the flock didn't, they want them all to be murdered. So if you haven't already, just head over to rebelnews.com and check out what our friend Drea,
it's savetheostriches.com. I can't even believe that I'm saving the ostriches, but the story is that the CFIA has issued a culling order after an anonymous tip led to the secluded farm and claimed that the PCR test results they ran on 2 diseased birds came back positive for avian flu weeks ago. Now, the farmers believe that their 400 remaining ostriches are naturally immune to the avian flu. And it's possible that the younger ones who did get sick were not sick at all with avian flu. And these ostriches are part of a research program with Japan's Kyoto Prefectural University. Good luck, Drea, saying that live on air. But anyways, they've been using these ostriches to extract antibodies from their eggs in an effort to prevent an avian flu outbreak. But it sounds like the Moderna got involved, and there's some pressure on the CFIA. And so here we are.
Yeah, you said the magic words, PCR test, and Moderna got involved, and now it is a shit show. But people aren't putting up with it. I hear there's about 100 people out there right now. They're camped out.
Yes.
People are not putting up with this crap anymore.
Yeah. It's absolute nonsense. This is a government, by the way, that sent money to the Wuhan Virology Institute after the COVID-19 outbreak that sources say credibly, came from that that Chinese military lab. This is not just some benevolent lab. This is the Chinese government military lab.
Allegedly by way of Winnipeg, by the way.
Allegedly by way of Winnipeg. Exactly. I did a story on that. But after that, Justin Trudeau sends them $900 million or $900,000 to do research on COVID. So this is the same government that, funds that research at the military lab that quite likely leaked it accidentally or otherwise. And yet they're going to cull these perfectly healthy animals in the name of science and research on the next pandemic.
There must be a consensus. I'm glad you cleared that up, the 900 million. I thought the 900 million was like a thank you card for a job well done or something. This whole time I was very confused. Well, yeah, we're over our hour. We're just over an hour. And there's so many things going on right now. We could probably spend 4 hours talking about things, but I'm not going to take that much of your time. Is there anything other that you can think of on your mind that's really pressing that you want people to pay attention to right now? I'm sure if there is, that you have stuff on Rebel News about it.
There are so many things that we're working on right now. I've got a couple of stories coming out that are just, it's so like the government waste that they have been getting away with for so long. The foreign interference cover up that just happened this week. The fix was in from the very beginning. I think the worst part in all of that is that there are 11 parliamentarians. Now, some are in the Senate, so whatever, we can't do anything about them. But there are 11 parliamentarians in the Canadian government that have, according to CSIS, wittingly or unwittingly participated in foreign interference. And we are not going to know who they are before the next election. Now, I will tell you, if they are MPs, they are all Liberals. The reason I know that is because, to their credit, the Conservatives told on themselves every time that they thought that there was some sort of foreign interference, some hanky-panky happening. They told on themselves, including they told on one of their own senators, and they also told on Patrick Brown. So what that means is that there are quite likely 9 Liberal MPs out there who will probably have their nomination papers signed by the party to run again. And that should scare us all.
Well, there is a way we could deal with that. You say we can't deal with senators, we can. Alberta could declare independence and we can have our own government that was always guaranteed to be free of foreign interference. But, again, a boy can dream.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that is that up on Rebel News already?
That one? Yeah. We've got stories on the foreign interference. I sat through the last 6 weeks of the hearing. So there's clips on Rebel News, all the testimony and article on the Justice Hoag's findings, which were just a complete cover up. That's on Rebel News. And we should all be worried because zero has changed. We did it. An inquiry, 12 weeks of inquiry, 2 reports. The Justice Hoag's report found that foreign interference had affected some ridings, but nothing has changed. And in fact, it's worse. As you can see, you can register your dog to vote for a Liberal these days.
I think it only counts if it's interference within a conservative government in Russia, right? That's
exactly.
These days.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it certainly is stranger than fiction. I get more entertainment value now watching news on social media and independent media than I ever did watching TV. I haven't watched a TV series in 5 years.
Chris, you know what you should do? Here's what you should do. Before we go, I'm going to tell you something that you should do because we all did it at Rebel News. Yesterday, the White House said that they are opening up White House accreditation to bloggers, vloggers, YouTubers, and independent journalists. I guess they had like 7,500 people apply in one day, including all the Rebel News journalists. But I think you should do that too. And when the Independent Press Gallery fires back up in Canada, it's just been on idle for a little bit. I think you should join that also because it's free and we advocate for the rights of independent journalists all across the country in the face of government censorship and arrests. And anyway, I think that those are the two things that you should do. Independent press gallery, and then be a White House correspondent for the Chris and Kerry show.
I'm definitely going to look into it. I've
must.
already actually made some requests to some folks in the States. So
yeah,
I'll do that. Yeah, that was a very smart thing. I didn't realize that had happened, but a lot of the problems we're facing right now are because the mainstream media, I don't know if I can even call them that, legacy media, they have been propagandizing this stuff for so long. It's not surprising that so many people believe it. So, they just believe it. It's facts.
Yep. Yeah.
So
the new media is taking over where the old media failed, and it can happen to a nicer bunch.
Yeah. Well, I think it'll continue to be good as long as nobody ever takes money from the government for reporting. I think that was the start of the major decline in this country, something that we certainly have to fix and never do again.
Yep.
Anyway, we're at an hour and 11 minutes. I don't want to take any more of your time unless you have anything else you want to talk about. I'm pretty much petered out though.
Yeah, I'm, I start work on Alberta time and I finish on Toronto time, or vice versa. So my days start pretty darn early. But Chris, I just want to let you know, I'm so proud to know you. I'm so proud of the stand that you took, not just for yourself, but for so many people. I think the visuals of you being taken away in handcuffs was a huge, huge problem for the Jason Kenney government. I think you, in no small part, are the reason we have a premier now who's fighting for us, instead of one who just sent Justin Trudeau strongly worded letters. And I'm so glad just to call you a friend. And I've got all the time in the world for you and Kerry.
Wow. Well, thank you very much. That's a silver lining. We went through a lot of really crazy stuff, and there was a lot of tribulations, but we met a lot of fantastic people. And I'm certainly glad that I got to meet you and some of the other Rebel crew. You guys are absolutely fantastic. And I have a treat. I have a treat for you.
Okay.
Do you know who Scott Thompson is?
Which one? From Kids in the Hall?
Kids in the Hall.
Really?
Yeah. He put out a really awesome music video.
Okay, let's watch.
Yeah, and I'm going to play it. So that's it, folks. Thank you very much. Please stick around for the music video I'm about to play. It's fantastic. And don't forget to head over to rebelnews.com and you know what? Like, share, subscribe, do all those things. Support those who are fighting the good fight. Rebel News is certainly one of them. And my friend Sheila is one of my favorites. So thanks again, Sheila. And hope to see you at the Whistle Stop Cafe sooner rather than later.
Yes.
All right. Okay, don't go anywhere, folks. Here it comes.
A perfect day to hit the road. This time we don't have a load. Headed to your stock-up little town. Look into the darkening sky. Open up your jaundiced eye. Listen to our wounded hearts go home. Go the balance to have our say. We're not racist nor anti-gay, but no matter how this goes, some will see villains, some will see heroes. I got no problem with the vax, but getting jabbed is not a tax. I had this dream one night on blow. I tossed the king in the yellow snow. We are truckers, working class suckers, hauling your fancy food. Some of us ain't right, but there's just not that fight. Baby, we all got screwed. The king declares martial law, giving in to its fatal flaw. Tried going before our heroes fall. Now we're lined up in a row. Our horns are tuned to Jericho. sometimes all that one can do is home. All you have to do is say hello. Instead he shook like a bowl of jello. In his cottage and called us names, filled the people's hearts with shame. According to the press, we're all white trash, so it's no biggie to freeze our cash. Friends and countrymen, all in the ring, all join hands and let us sing. We are truckers, uncouth fuckers, not known for our ploys. We just want freedom, smoke them if you need them. Sorry for the noise. Canada says it loves a group, yet the geese have flown the chicken coop. One day they will all come home to roost. But now it's in the rearview mirror. We've got to let go of these years. Listen to our broken brains go. Oh,